Alright, it's time for part 2 of the baking. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take the bread out, the dough out of the container that we put in yesterday. It's been in the fridge overnight. We're going to shape it and let it sit and come back to room temperature now. So you can see right now, just taking the lid off, you can see how much room the dough is actually taken up. And with this size container, it's nice you have the top on. There's still a little room for a pocket of air above it. So it's the perfect size for this recipe. Now, again, when we looked at the recipe, we said it was for 4 loaves. So really, if you're concerned that you might not be grabbing the right amount, you can literally just take a knife and draw an X so you know exactly how much dough you want to grab. But basically at this point, we're going to take a quarter of this dough out, shape it into a ball, and let it sit. So the other thing you're going to need is something to put it on. It can be a pizza peel, it doesn't have to be. It can be a cutting board, you can even just put it right on the counter. It really doesn't matter. The only benefits you get from something like this is when it's time to put it in the oven. Just makes it a little bit easier. You can sort of put it on and slide it right off. So the very first part, you don't have to worry about the oven yet, you don't have to worry about the temperatures, nothing like that. All you want to do is you want to take a little bit of the flour that we used yesterday. You want to put a nice base on the pizza peel. What this is going to do is it's going to, while the dough is rising, because this dough was wetter than most doughs, you have a little bit of concern that you'll shape it and it'll look all nice and then it'll get stuck to the peel. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. A lot of times, just because of the way the kitchens are, my kitchen configured, I'll just pick up the dough and put it on the stone anyway. So really, it doesn't matter, but it makes it a little bit easier. You get a nice generous helping of flour. You just want to sort of spread it around. Give the dough a nice place to sit while it's working. You also want to get your hands nice and floury because it will make it a lot easier. This dough is kind of sticky, again, because it's so wet compared to most. What you're going to do is the area that you're working on, we're going to just take this quarter right here. You want to again put some more flour down. You can sort of spread it just on that quarter that we're going to be playing with. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to basically make a nice, you'll see that in some spots of this dough that you've made, there's some parts that are a little bit harder, a little bit less wet looking than the rest. What you want to do is you want to take the shell that we just sort of made here, because the actual gluten in the flour is all of it's going to combine with the water, make a nice sort of like shell for the bread. What we're going to do is we're going to basically take our fingers and sort of push in it all around the corners here. And so we're actually going to take this little cloak and try and wrap it around. Now during this whole process, you don't want to really take more than about 30 seconds at most, and that's because if you do more than about 30 seconds, what you're going to do is you're actually going to be kneading the dough, and a lot of those air bubbles that we worked hard to get are going to go away. If you get rid of all the air bubbles, obviously your dough is going to be a little bit flatter, it won't be as puffy. So really at this point, all we're doing is we want to go around. I'm going to sort of push in, take it all the way to the bottom. So now we've got a nice marked out spot of what we're going to actually scoop out. And at this point, all we're going to do is pull it out. You'll have to take one of your hands and sort of help, in this case, actually make the cut. At this point, all we're going to do is sort of wrap it around. Again, we want to get just a nice ball, and that's it. Just go place it nicely in the center of your peel. We're going to let it sit here for about an hour. At this point, all we're doing is really letting it come up to room temperature. The time varies. Hour is pretty much the average. If you're in a warm house, maybe it's a little bit less than that. If you're in a cold house, maybe a little bit longer. But for the first couple times to get the hang of it, just an hour is fine. About halfway through, so about 30 minutes from now, I'm going to turn the oven to 450, and you want to make sure the stone is in there while you're doing that. I usually put the stone, on the second to lowest, rung in my oven. And you also want to take, it doesn't have to be there initially, but you want to take maybe your broiler pan and actually put it into the bottom of the oven as well. And I'll show you why later. We're actually need to pour some water in there when we put the bread in. So you just want some sort of pan with sides to it, with some lips to it, so you can actually hold some water when you pour it in. And that's pretty much it. So we'll see you again in about an hour The oven will be preheated and this dough will be ready to go in. Alright, time to bake some bread. So you'll see right here, the dough has warmed up to room temperature. It's gotten a little bit bigger as well, flattened out a bit. So at this point, we're going to dust the top again with a little bit more flour. You can use the same stuff that's on the board. You can get new stuff, doesn't really matter. But you're just trying to get that another fresh shell of flour. And what this is going to do, this is going to sort of react with the steam in the oven, and it'll give it a nice crust. At this point, I want to again just make sure, see if it's stuck. If it is, it's not going to slide off really well. If it is stuck as well, also you don't have to actually use the pizza peel. You can really just pick it up and drop it on. It doesn't really matter either way. What we're going to do now, after you sprinkle the top, you actually want to make those nice little artistic cuts that you usually see. And what you can do is you can either just wet the blade first so it slides through, although really it doesn't really matter too much. And you're just going to make a nice little X. And all this is going to do is when the crust actually starts forming, because you're going to have a nice shell on the outside and the inside's going to be expanding. If you don't put this in there, the crust will crack somewhere because it has to get out. The pressure has to get out. At this point, now that this is done, the other thing that you're going to need, again, the oven had in there the baking stone and the broiler pan. So now we're ready. We're going to pour the water, 1 cup of hot water into the broiler pan. So I'm going to set you up right there. This part's really easy, so all you're going to do is open it up. Pull out the tray with the stone on it. You can see I keep it sort of to the left so that I have access to the boiler tray on the right. Just want to put that guy right on there. Slide it back in. Boiler tray here to the right. So all I'm going to do is pour this water in. Make sure it's hot because you don't want it to bring up temperature. You want it to start steaming immediately. All you're going to do is pour it in, watch out, and then close it real quick. And at this point, all you're going to do is set it for 35 minutes. Make sure you don't open the door until it's done, because you'll let all that steam out, and then you're good to go. Alright, at this point the timer just went off, so you can turn on your oven light, look in, see if it's looking nice and brown and stuff, and if it is, you're good to go. All you're going to do, before you go ahead and completely take it out and turn off the oven, what you can do is sort of move it. It shouldn't be stuck to the stone or anything, it should be moving. And if you want, you can sort of take a pad or something, because it is really hot, and just sort of tilt it up. And if you just want to knock on the bottom, and if you feel like a really dull thud, then you're good to go. Sort of a hollow, dull thud. So this one's done. At this point, you're just going to take it out. Again, I'll just use this because it's really hot. And there will be a lot of flour on the bottom. That's because we put flour on it. And at that point, you just want to stick it on a rack and let it cool. You'll end up with a nice little round bowl. You should let it cool all the way to room temperature. Obviously, it's never going to happen because you're going to start digging into it, but at least let it give a couple minutes, and you'll know when it's starting to get cool enough, because after about 5 minutes you can listen and you'll actually hear a bunch of crackling. That's the crust is finally starting to set. But make sure you put it above above whatever counter surface you're on, because otherwise the bottom will get really moist. All the moisture is still going to start coming out. You don't want it to get soggy, so keep it nice and crisp, keep it elevated on a cooling rack, and you're good to go. Enjoy!